So Splatoon is pretty weird. You play as a kid who can turn into a squid that uses ink as both a weapon and a means of transportation, and the entire thing is wrapped up in an over-the-top visual style and an attitude straight from the 90s. And I did mention that you can turn into a freaking squid, right? Yeah, it's pretty weird. I mean, why would you want to turn into a squid anyway? Well, for quite a few reasons as it turns out. In this case, it allows you to pass through grates, climb up walls, and move twice as fast as normal, but only, and this is important, when swimming through ink of your own color. And that's a catch, because you can only lay down ink while in kid form. It's a really interesting mechanic that's easy to get into, but takes some time to master, as you constantly have to decide when to go on the offensive as a kid, or switch to the more vulnerable squid form for increased agility. But not only is it an interesting mechanic, but it's a fun one too. I mean, the mere act of locomotion, or moving around, is a blast. And how often can you say that about a game? In fact, the controls in general are fantastic, with the optional motion controls making fast and deadly targeting feel second nature through gentle movements of the gamepad. I often found myself falling into a zen-like state where I would pop in and out of the ink, laying down ink trails and effortlessly swimming through them, only to pop out, splat an enemy, before sinking back in and zipping off elsewhere. It really does feel great. And it's that interplay between the kid and squid form that's the basis for pretty much everything in the game, and it leads to all kinds of interesting strategies in the multiplayer mode, such as by, say, throwing down the ink path to give a teammate a head start, or when encountering an enemy you can try and spray some ink behind them to cut off their escape route, or you can even play more stealthy if you want to hide in plain sight by turning into a squid and remaining motionless in your own ink. Splatoon really makes you think about strategy in a way like no shooter has before, as the very terrain is effectively changing with every blast of ink, and so are your options. And it's this fundamental battle over territory that forms the basis of the two multiplayer modes in the game. Now, only one of those modes is actually available from the start of the game, and that's Turf Wars. That's the simpler of the two. Here, you have 3 minutes to cover as much of the arena in your team's ink as possible while trying to stop the opposing team from doing the same thing. Now, 3 minutes may not sound like much time, and it isn't, which lends each battle an incredibly fast pace. And either team's momentum can really change at the drop of a hat. I've had entire matches turn around completely within the final 15 to 20 seconds. And even when time's up, there's still the suspense of finding out who the ultimate winner is, as Judd the Cat tallies up the final scores. I found Turf Wars to be incredibly addictive. I can't count how many times I said to myself just one more round before finally turning the game off over an hour later. The other multiplayer mode is Splat Zones, which is basically Splatoon's version of King of the Hill. In this mode, your team battles for control of either 1 or 2 marked zones on the map, by what else? Spraying them with ink. Now once you've taken control of all the zones, your team's timer will begin counting down from 100, and if it reaches 0, you'll win. But if the opposing team manages to steal control of them, your team will then be hit with a time penalty. Now when compared to Turf War, this mode is pretty intense. It's not only generally much longer, but demands a lot more skill and coordination. Because, unlike Turf War, everyone is funneled to the same points on the map, making for frequent enemy encounters, and basically guarantees that control of the zones will switch repeatedly throughout the match. And it's probably for those reasons that this mode is restricted to only those who have reached level 10 or higher, as it really does require full understanding of the game's mechanics and weapon sets. And speaking of weapons, it's in this mode where the differences in weapon types really become important. For instance, I didn't find a sniper-like ink charger to be that useful for Turf War, but it can be a huge help in Splat Zones, allowing a teammate to protect the zones by picking off opponents from a safe distance. So while you might be able to get by with an entire team of rollers in Turf War, that probably won't be the case in Splat Zones, where a diverse weapon set really is key. And it's this extra depth that makes Splat Zones feel so rewarding, or maybe crushing depending on your perspective. I mean, you really have to work for those victories, and a team that works well together will definitely have the edge, whereas it's far less important for the more lone wolf nature of Turf War. Now, although multiplayer may be the primary focus of Splatoon, the game also features a single-player campaign that not only acts as a great tutorial for preparing you for online battles, but can also stand on its own as a solid 5 to 6 hour adventure, or even longer if you actively seek out all the collectibles. And I had almost as much fun in the game's story mode as I did the multiplayer. It introduces new gameplay concepts in almost every level, including a ton of elements you won't find outside of it, such as ink rails that allow you to zip from place to place, or the epic boss fights, which are some of the best I've played in recent memory, with each one making full use of Splatoon's unique mechanics. Take this guy for example, which you can only bring to a halt by spraying a puddle of ink large enough that he gets stuck in it. My only real complaint is that I found them all to be a bit on the easy side, with the exception of the final boss, which is kind of amazing by the way. And speaking of which, the game's overall presentation is fantastic, with bright, colorful levels that only grow more colorful as you spray them with ink. And the developers did a fantastic job of making the ink feel like a real substance, such as how it oozes believably, or reflects the light if you catch it at the right angle. And if you dive in, it even muffles the music, as if it's too thick to hear through. And speaking of the music, both the single player and the multiplayer feature their own unique selection of songs, and I found almost all of them to be incredibly catchy. I just wish there were more of them, especially in the single player where I felt like they were repeated just a little too often, which takes away some of the uniqueness of each level. Okay, so I realize I've been showering this game mostly with praise, but I do have a few complaints, and they almost all lie with the game's online interface. such as how it's pretty annoying that you have to exit the current lobby in order to switch weapons or gear, making it almost impossible to hop back in with the same group of friends or people that you were playing with. And then there's the fact that I hope you're a fan of the Squid Sisters, because you'll be seeing them a lot. Specifically, every time you turn on the game, and even then, every few hours as they update you on the current selection of maps available for the multiplayer mode. It's kinda cute at first, but they quickly wear out their welcome as they effectively tell you nothing of importance, and repeat the same lines ad nauseum. Is it really that hard to add a skip option? Now besides those complaints, there are a couple of issues I've heard brought up repeatedly that I think are worth addressing. One is a lack of maps, because yes, there are only 5 of them in the game currently, though there are more on the way in the form of free updates. And yeah, that is a pretty small amount compared to most shooters. But Splatoon isn't your typical shooter, and as such, I didn't find the comparative lack of maps to be a problem at all, given how fresh I found every match to be, whether it was in Turf War or Splat Zones. What I'm saying is the core gameplay is so unique, it really overshadows the lack of map diversity. And what maps are there are a ton of fun, and they all feel very different too. Finally, there's of course an infamous lack of voice chat. And I'll be the first to admit it'd be a nice option to have. But with that said, I personally didn't mind its absence that much. Again, let me stress it would be a good option to have, but it didn't really hamper my enjoyment of either mode either. So to wrap things up, I love Splatoon. It's a breath of fresh air in a pretty crowded genre. I found the single player to be fun, if a bit short, while the online multiplayer is straight up the most fun I've had on the Wii U yet, and it worked almost completely flawlessly. I experienced lag only a handful of times out of hundreds of matches, and it almost always ran at a rock solid 60 frames per second. In short, this is one of my favorite games on the Wii U. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more Splatoon and other things gaming as well.